Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm here in Bangkok in Thailand, and it's the home of Brian Berletic, and I've been a big fan of his for some time. We've spoken a number of times over WeChat, and I thought it'd be great to come and bring him on the channel and we can talk about Thailand and China and just different things and have a bit of a conversation. So please introduce yourself, Brian.
I'm Brian Berletic. I'm an American. I'm a former US Marine. I've been living in Thailand pretty much my entire adult life, and by trade I'm an industrial designer, but because of circumstances I do geopolitical analysis. I have the New Atlas YouTube channel, and I'm also on Telegram.
Yeah, I'll put all his links in the description of the video, and his stuff is really, really good. It's very factual, he's very knowledgeable. He's done it for a long, long time, so I strongly recommend you go and check out his stuff. And I guess a lot of you will already know him. I've seen in the comments on our videos, that you've commented you should go and watch Brian's channel, and I do. I watch many of his videos. They're really good. Anyway, so this is my sort of second time in Bangkok. We arrived in Bangkok sort of 5 or 6 weeks ago. Then we went off to travel around. I'm back here. And one thing that strikes me of being in Bangkok, it very much reminds me of Guangzhou in China like 15 years ago. Still a little bit chaotic.
Yeah, a little bit.
You know, there's still a lot of street vendors everywhere. It's a bit sort of unlevel and higgledy-piggledy. The one thing that strikes me that is I really dislike though is the traffic in Bangkok. It is super crazy. But jump on the metro system, or is there one above called BTS?
Well, it's confusing because the MRT used to be just a subway, and now there's an elevated line, and then the BTS actually is just all elevated all throughout the system.
So you use that sort of system, and it can get you anywhere. So yeah, I mean, it's very much like Guangzhou was 15 years ago. And it's also interesting that I haven't travelled that much around Thailand yet. I've spent some time in Bangkok, and I've spoken to expats in Bangkok, and it's completely surprised me how anti-China those expats are in Bangkok.
Doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, a lot of these expats, they're from the West, they're from the United States, they're from Europe. I'm not going to say all of them, but a lot of them come here for all the wrong reasons. Despite the stereotypes, not everywhere you go in Thailand caters to these type of people. It's actually a small and ever shrinking place where they can go and do these sort of, you know what I'm talking about. And so they're kind of low class. Even back in their own country, they were kind of low lives. When they come here, they think they're above everyone, but that's just because they can't speak the language and they don't know what everyone is saying about them. And they get bitter about Thailand because that illusion that they are superior gets chipped away at over the years. And they don't like China because they see China as lifting up the whole region.
Yeah, I also get the impression that, I mean, just walking around central Bangkok, I'm seeing them, they're in bars from sort of 10 o'clock in the morning till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I suspect they don't have much to do, so they're just consuming huge amounts of Western media. And that's sort of, guiding their judgment, because literally I've spoken to probably, in the time in here, 6 or 8 expats, and everyone had a negative. When I told them, I live in China, it's like a really bad thing, and it's like, it's terrible there, isn't it? Actually, it's not. And it seems they just don't want to listen to my side of it. They've completely made up their mind, and that's it. And that quite shocked me, really.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that tourists from China make up the largest segment. Well, before the whole COVID thing hit, there were more tourists coming from China than all Western countries combined. And the whole country began kind of turning over to cater to Chinese tourists. And they're not paying much attention to Westerners. Are coming in smaller and smaller numbers. The places that they're interested in begin to shrink. It was never a huge part of, a lot of people think Thailand is dependent on tourism. Before Chinese tourists started coming in huge numbers, Some years it would be a little bit above average, but most years it's around the average percentage of the GDP worldwide. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah,
when the Chinese tourists started coming, I mean, there's so many of them. That's when it really became a huge part of the GDP. But that's not because nothing else is going on. It's just you had to see it. There's just so many. The signs were changing to Chinese instead of English, and I saw that as a good sign. I mean, China and Thailand have a history going back centuries. Centuries. A lot of Thai people have at least a percentage of their ancestry is Chinese, so it just seems like a natural thing to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because I spoke to a few sort of Thai owners of like restaurants and market stalls, and they say they're really missing the spending power actually of the Chinese. They say they have a lot of Indian tourists here, but they don't spend. But the Chinese used to come and they would spend like big time. And I actually think that a lot of the world, because pre-COVID, in that year before COVID, 120 million Chinese traveled abroad. And I guess many countries are missing that sort of spending power, you know. It's mad. You know, the reason I'm back here is we attended an exhibition in Bangkok in the exhibition centre there called Mobile Broadband Forum, and it was sponsored by Huawei. But what blew my mind is that we're going around this exhibition and there was a lot of Chinese companies there. There's also Thai companies. So Huawei basically provide the 5G infrastructure. So whether that be public 5G through carriers like DTAC, is it? Or AIS?
AIS.
Or for like certain industries, they provide like private 5G networks. Then what they do, they have a project guy at Huawei, and he will then work with like Thai companies and Chinese companies to build like an infrastructure on top of that for their customers' needs. So a couple of examples is mining. There's a big mine in Thailand where they're automating all the trucks in the mine through a 5G network. Sort of a lot of the machinery is all like now 5G operated, so there's no users in that machinery. That brings a lot of safety. And then there was a car plant they were talking about, which they've automated. I'm hoping actually to go and make a video there.
There's actually, again, a lot of people don't know much about Thailand. There's a lot of stereotypes, but the economy of Thailand is mostly industry, manufacturing, agriculture, and then everything else are just like many other things, but much smaller percentages. So there, if you go down the east coast of the Gulf of Thailand, it's all factories, almost from Bangkok all the way down. If you're traveling, all you're going to see is gigantic factories.
I remember from my sort of computer engineering days, most of the hard drives are made in Thailand.
That was a thing. I don't know if it still is.
I think a lot still are. But anyway, this exhibition, the most interesting thing for me there was that the largest hospital in Bangkok, the largest public hospital, they have this strategy to become a smart hospital.
What people might not know is that Thailand has universal health care. So if you're wondering why, if they're stretching their resources, this is the reason why. They specifically work against big pharma from the West. This is one of the pet peeves Washington has with Bangkok. This goes back years and years. The whole time I've been here, over 20 years actually, they've been pressuring the Thai government to buy expensive drugs rather than make generic versions. So the Thai government and the Thai healthcare system working with Huawei, knowing that's the cheapest, most efficient way to solve the problem, this is what they're going to do, no matter how much pressure Washington places on them. I guess within reason, the West will always try to put more and more pressure. So this is a constant thing. If you read the news, if you understand this background, everything you read in the news about politics and geopolitics regarding not just Thailand but all of Southeast Asia, it's the same story over and over again.
Well, it makes so much sense for Thailand to work with China than against them, but obviously we all know that the US doesn't want that to happen. Because if you look at trade around the world, you know, the area where the most trade growth is Southeast Asia. You know, you're looking at that trade is increasing significantly, and it will increase a lot more as, you know, I believe China are assisting Thailand with railways. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. So actually, on the MRT, on the BTS lines, the mass transit in Bangkok, you'll notice that a lot of the newer train cars, all the rolling stock is from China.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And Thailand and China right now as we're recording this, they're building the high-speed rail from the already completed line through Laos, from Vientiane, Laos, all the way to Bangkok. That'll be the first leg. So they're working on that right now. And again, if you see protests here in Thailand, these anti-government protests, they are led by a billionaire that wants to cancel the high-speed rail. So again, it all comes down to the people actually living in this region wanting to work with China, having a history that stretches across generations, and the West trying to maneuver opposition groups they themselves created into power to stop this. That
just
is
because they want them to be pro-American, right?
Well, if you're America and you want to rule the entire world, you have to stop everyone else from developing, because technology is really leveling the playing field.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you can stop that or reverse that, then you can keep everyone subordinated to yourself. But it's such an unnatural thing to do. And the best cover for doing it is constant conflict.
Yeah.
You know, like
it amazes me when I look at the way the world is now. You know, you go back 20 years, and America and Europe loved China. You know, while they were making all their stuff cheap, and it was keeping inflation low in the West, and they weren't really a technological sort of threat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, China's fantastic. All of a sudden, because China are really smart, they learn very quickly. And they're not going to be the country that's making the shit for the West forever, you know.
Yeah.
They've risen up, and it's got that point now, and the West are going, oh, crikey, you know, things have changed. We need to attack them and keep them down. We can't have them getting equal or surpassing us,
Yeah,
you know?
and they loved China when they still had it in their head that they could do regime change and somehow put a client regime into power. Once that illusion evaporated, this is when you saw all of this hatred and this, I would call, extremism against China coming out from everywhere now.
Yeah, I mean, I often have this sort of thing that I always think through. If you were a leader and you were setting up a new country, so I need to choose a style of government and a society. So you could choose China, which, okay, it's not perfect, but they have a fairly stable society. They're progressing very quickly. Their economy's growing. Or then you look at the US, who have more people than anywhere in prison.
Yeah.
They have a sham democracy where people think they can vote, but they can't really change anything. You have this huge bunch of neocons that are just invading countries all around the world. You have many people in extreme poverty in meant to be the richest nation in the world.
Yeah.
And like, you're thinking, hang on a minute, which is the best society? You know, China never tries to force their sort of system onto anybody else. You know, the US for 50 years has tried to force their system onto everybody else, and if they don't fall in line, it's, oh, we're going to sanction you, we're going to invade you, we're going to occupy you.
Yeah.
And it just boggles my mind that so many people in the West just don't see it.
Yeah.
You know, because they're bombarded with Western media who are in the government's pockets, you know.
From cradle to grave, they have these ideas put into their head. I know, as an American who grew up in the United States, I had this idea put into my head, and I never would have been the wiser if I didn't travel overseas. I mean, it was just by luck that I joined the military, just to show you how badly brainwashed I was. And I wanted to see the rest of the world. That's one of the attractions to joining the military. And I was in Japan, and all of these stereotypes that I had in my head about Japan, just, again, the first day you're there, they all just disappear. I mean, if you want to see what it's really like, I know a lot of people that go there, they didn't want to go there. They only want to see what they want to see. Same with these expats that come here to Thailand. They just want to see and believe what they want to see and believe, and there's no hope for them. But when you realize how badly you were lied to, the kind of box that you were placed into by the media, I mean, you got to question everything about everything. Every time you hear a news story, especially if it's the Western media presenting it, you should say, I need to look into that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if just taking the sort of main topic right now in the news, which is the Ukraine-Russia conflict, you know, you read Western, even the UK Ministry of Defence puts out these like super pro-Ukraine, oh, they're doing so well, but you know, they've literally cut off anything other than their own sort of propaganda news. You know, they banned RT, they banned all these other sort of news organisations. Nobody, you know, when I was back in the UK, you hear nothing from the other side. It's all from like Western media who are all like behind Ukraine, you know. I just find it absolutely mad how people are so taken in. And the other thing, people think the war started in February. They have no idea of the 8 years previous, you know, and it's just frustrating so much, man.
So if you look at Ukraine, yes, absolutely. You have to look at the history. If you look at what actually happened, we hear about this narrative that Ukraine is fighting for its freedom, fighting for its sovereignty right now against evil Russian invaders. But actually, it was the United States that in 2014 overthrew the elected government and installed the client regime in its place. And ever since then, the country has been without freedom, without sovereignty. The decisions being made in Kiev reflected the interests of Washington, not the people of Ukraine. You can see how the economy cratered from 2014 onward. It had nothing to do with Russia. That was the U.S. forcing them to irrationally. They're sharing a border with Russia. Clearly, they would have been doing lots of business over the decades, or throughout history, really. And the U.S. artificially cut that off. They're doing the exact same thing in Taiwan, for example. It's actually much worse because Ukraine was, you know, recognized officially as a country. Taiwan is not. Not even officially. They're not. Officially, technically, if you look at the U.S., Australia, the U.K. stance on Taiwan, they recognize it as part of China, and yet they're doing the same process of artificially turning Taiwan against the rest of China, trying to isolate them from the Chinese economy. What is this going to do for Taiwan? Is the U.S. going to be able to provide an alternative? No, of course not. Of course not. So it's just slash and burn. If we cannot control it, we will burn it down because it'll be one less. It will be one less thing that China will have at its disposal. And this is how. I mean, is this how you want human history to go from now onward, where the U.S. is just going to try to destroy everything because it cannot control it? Where is that going to leave us all?
I mean, I see Taiwan as a Ukraine, whereas, you know, the US are fighting Russia through Ukraine as a proxy. They want to do exactly the same through Taiwan to China. I personally, and this is just my own opinion, I don't think the US fighting a war from a base of the sea would stand a cat in hell's chance against China. I'm pretty sure China have a lot of tools in their box that nobody knows about. You know, they're not going to brag about all what they've got and what they're doing, but I think it would be a huge error for the US to launch a strike against China through Taiwan. I really do.
I don't know that they're going to launch us. I don't know how they're going to actually organize this entire plan of theirs, but you can clearly see they've got a client regime they've installed into power. Ironically, also in 2014, they had the Sunflower Movement. Reorganizing Taiwan's internal political affairs, getting it ready for Tsai Ing-wen to come in. So she is a client regime of the U.S. She reflects Washington's interests at the expense of the people living in Taiwan. They're pouring in weapons, pouring in money for media, again, to interfere in the internal political affairs of Taiwan. So you're going to say that it's a democracy. Nothing is actually being decided in Taipei or by the people living in Taiwan.
It's all done in Washington.
Exactly. It is the dictatorship from abroad that the U.S. is accusing China of somehow organizing. It's ridiculous. And you notice how the West is usually projecting. When they accuse someone of something, it's usually they're the ones that are guilty, and they're just shifting responsibility elsewhere.
I mean, my big concern about the Taiwan issue is that it could start by accident because you've got America, you know, they're sending all these warships through. There's only going to have to be an incident where a Chinese plane gets shot down or an American plane gets shot down, and that could be the touch paper. And I think if it started, it would be very difficult to stop because it almost feels to me as if, you know, the US keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and there's going to come a point, I think, where they push one step too far and it's going to escalate, and that's not good at all, you know.
I think one thing that you might notice, a lot of people might notice, is that especially for Russia, what they're doing with Ukraine seems drastic, but it could have been many times worse, much faster. And they've got this kind of incremental approach. And I think China is looking at it the same way. They know time is on their side. They're trying to head off the United States from doing something completely insane. So they want the deterrent to be there, but they themselves don't want to initiate hostilities. They know if in 10 years they will be in a stronger position than the United States. So if they could just play out the clock, this is something they would be interested in doing. The U.S. is, deliberately provoking Russia, provoking China, specifically to speed things up before time runs out.
So you have the Russian operation in Ukraine, and America tried to turn the world against Russia. Yeah, you go back over the last just 30 years, and how many times have America occupied and invaded? I mean, even now as we speak, they're just stealing oil from Syria,
Yes.
And the Syrian people are really suffering. But that's okay, because we're America. We can do whatever we want, but Russia can't.
Yeah.
I just find it incredible how they have such double speak. It's okay for them to do anything they want to, but not okay for anybody else to defend their interests,
And since you've been traveling around Southeast Asia, do you feel like China is being isolated, or do you feel that, I feel like in Thailand, the Western media is very persuasive. It's everywhere. It's very hard to uproot it, especially here in Thailand, even though the government is aware that this is a problem. They just don't know how to uproot it in a way that doesn't look like overreach.
Well, so far I felt that Singapore and Malaysia seem quite pro sort of China. I don't always use like the word using pro and against, but they're quite friendly nations, and a lot of the people we spoke to seem to think it's good, because China are all about business. They want to do trade, they want to do business, not just for their benefit, but for they know, if you bring a poorer country up, the economy will be better, the people will live better, China will benefit from the trade, they buy more stuff. And then in Philippines seem very sort of aligned with the US.
Unfortunately,
like you can really see that in the society and the culture. And Thailand so far, kind of a bit more neutral is my impression. The expats are very anti, but at the end of the day, the expats they don't mean anything. It's the Thai people. And I spoke to a few Thai people, and they're like, it's all about them. They've obviously had a massive hit to their economy through COVID, and they're just more interested in getting their economy back and inviting people. And I see from the exhibition I went to, it seems that there's a lot of Thai companies working really closely with Chinese companies too, especially on the digital side, to digitalize industry. And I think that's a fantastic thing. China have the technology, they have the infrastructure expertise. They're bringing it to Thailand. Thailand's economy will rise. They will buy more stuff from China. The people here will get a better standard of living. It's all a win-win, and that's what China preach a lot. And it's really interesting that you're probably aware that we've just got a new Prime Minister again in the UK. One of the first things China did was congratulate him and say, we hope we can move forward and do some good cooperation and be prosperous together. Literally hours later, the press is full of how, Rishi Sunak's had a call with Biden and vowed to be harder on China and stop China's rise, and I'm just thinking, this is just crazy. It's Europe and the UK that will lose out big time, because China are not stopping for anyone. They'll continue on their path. They might have a bump in the road because of sanctions from the US, but long term, they will power ahead.
If you look at how the U.S. is trying to place sanctions on China, not just to hurt them economically, but to impede progress. You can see how China is circumventing this, how determined they are to, if you don't want to contribute and be part of the prosperity that is going to unfold in the future, that's fine, we're still going to do this. And they are still doing it. And I like to point out to people that if you look at the Chinese education system, they are churning out millions every single year, millions more in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. These are actual fields that you need to contribute to technology.
Absolutely.
And technology is what's contributing to your economy, your military prowess. This is the investment China is making. You cannot have millions more graduating every year and
not make a difference.
Yeah, and not make a difference, and not think that this is going to accumulate over time in China's favor. It is futile. It's futile for the United States to insist that it dominates the entire planet, considering it's the percentage of the population America makes up. It makes no sense. Why? Who gave you the right to do that? And a nation like China, with a larger population than the G7 combined, to think you're going to tell them what they're going to do, what they aren't going to do, I think it's just, it's this Western arrogance that has spanned generations, and now they're at a brick wall, and they're not handling it well.
It's really interesting you say about the graduates. I was lucky enough to visit one of the Huawei campuses in Dongguan in China, and just on that one campus they have 40,000 engineers.
Wow.
40,000.
That's a lot.
300 of those are PhDs, and numerous scores of them are all master's degrees.
Yeah.
And these are working on stuff that we're not going to see for another 5, 7, 10 years. They have a lot of smart people. They will overcome the obstacles, you know. And
we were just talking as you were setting up. We were talking about DJI as a Chinese company. And you always hear anti-Chinese pundits, advocates for this ridiculous hostility toward China. Chinese people steal IP, they steal ideas. They're not, they work hard, but they don't have the brains to make new ideas. Of course they do, and you can see it. You can see them putting out products that there is no equivalent to it in the West.
That's right.
And even Western analysts, because I have done a lot of research into the Chinese military and Chinese weapons, the development of their missile arsenal, for example. You have Western analysts admitting they have weapons that there is no equivalent to in the West. It's the same with Russia. They have air defense systems there is no equivalent to in the West. How does a society that you claim is inferior, that cannot think for themselves, that are constantly stealing other people's ideas, how is it that they've got not just ideas of their own, but ones in such crucial fields as, say, defense or IT? I mean,
it was quite funny because about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there's an article in the Chinese press that they'd found, I don't know if you remember, but China tested a hypersonic missile not too long ago. They literally flew it around the world.
Yes.
And this scared the shit out of the Americans. But it turns out the Chinese then released this university that was developing this. The Americans have been hacking into these university computers to try and steal all the knowledge for these hypersonic weapons. Because as far as I'm aware, America don't have operational hypersonic weapons.
Not that we know of.
Russia do. They've already used them.
Yeah.
And China do because they've tested them, And it's just ironic how, the America are always calling out China about hacking and stealing, and yet here we have America trying to steal China's, and I'm sure they will be trying to hack into companies like Huawei and DJI because these are companies in China that are really on the cutting edge of development and technology. You look at some of the DJI stuff, they've got 80-85% of the world's drone market. The US and Europe are just nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the US going to do now when, they can't buy DJI drones? They're just going to have to do without them because there's no equivalent, Just like you say, there's no Western equivalents to these things.
It's going to be I think it's going to be a hard wake-up call for the West. People with this attitude. I think there's a lot of people in the West. I mean, you're one of them. I'm one of them. When I say I think all people are equal, I don't just mean that.
Sure.
I don't just say that to be, in the cool club. I really believe that, and I can see it. I've lived in Asia my entire adult life. I have traveled back to the U.S. once or twice. I've seen how things are going over there, and I can see how things are going on over here. And I can tell that to think that the West somehow has everything to teach the world, and the world has nothing to teach the West. This is
crazy, isn't it?
It's not just arrogant, but it's dangerous because you start painting yourself into a corner when you see the rest of the world moving on without you, and you're too proud and stubborn to just say, look, maybe I'm wrong about some of these things. And I say this almost every video I make. The United States needs to stop trying to, put itself above all other nations and just work alongside all other nations. How much easier
Well,
everything
I
would
often
be.
say this, how much better would it be for the general population if these countries work together? How much further and quicker would they advance? And
Yeah.
you know, anyway, just to conclude, I think right now we're living in very, very interesting times. I believe there's a massive shift going on about, you know, because the last thing obviously America wanted was for Russia and China to come closer, and by their stupidity they've pushed them closer. And now Iran's coming in, like Saudi Arabia are starting to turn against the US, you know, big allies at one time, and now they're starting to see the light. And I feel, you know, America and Europe are kind of isolating themselves.
Yeah.
You know, America often like to talk about all the world are against Russia, or all the world are against China, but realistically it's them, Australia, Japan and Europe, you know.
Yes.
It's quite a small part of the world. And
Yes.
so yeah, I mean, that's my thoughts. I'm older. I hope I'm around long enough to see how it all plays out, because I think it's really, I think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be super interesting.
Yes, it's not going to matter what the United States tries to do to China. Yes, they're going to cause a lot of trouble. They're going to set companies in China, the Chinese people back, by extension, everyone in Asia. And people can see this. They can see when Thailand started doing, I mean, real serious business with China more recently. They can see how everything is rising up with China.
Yeah.
They can see it. And a lot of people, the government here is they're not as, you know, they're depicted by the Western media as a dictatorship, as ruthless. I mean, you're here. Do you feel like you're in a military dictatorship? No. And what they're going to do, they're not going to pick sides. They're just going to wait for the clock to run out. Mm-hmm. They can see what's going on in Russia, with Russia and the United States over Ukraine. They know time is on their hands. Just keep it calm, stay balanced, stay in the middle until this all works itself out. And
I mean, that's one thing I've always observed in China. They're very tactical, they're very strategic. You know, realistically, they could really harm the US if they wanted.
Yes.
They have $1 trillion worth of government bonds. You know, you've got big companies like Apple who pretty much rely solely on China for manufacturing.
Yes.
They control most of the world's rare earth processing.
Yes.
But they will not, like the US, like with this chips bill, cut off their nose to spite the face. It's really harming US chip companies like Qualcomm and AMD and
NVIDIA.
And like China will never do that. They will never cut off their nose to spite the face, and they will just sit and wait. You know, there's a saying in China that we don't need to do anything to America. We just need to wait because they will destroy themselves. You know?
Exactly.
And that's how I see it.
Yeah, maybe one last thought on that. I mean, you see Russia. A lot has been done to Russia to provoke Russia, and a lot of people get frustrated with Russia not really retaliating the way they wish they would. But Russia knows that a nation is not just its government. Say Turkey, when Turkey shot down a Russian warplane over Syria, that was a lot of people were thinking Russia will surely retaliate. But they knew that in time they could work past this. And if they do something rash and emotional now, and you see the US and the European Union doing a lot of rash, emotional things
Very
right
much
now.
So.
These are things you can't take back. It's like a teenager lashing out, not thinking like, oh, that could really hurt me in the long run. China and Russia are thinking these things through. So you have this conflict that I don't think is going anywhere anytime soon. But at least one half of this conflict are rational, mature, thinking about the future, not just for themselves, but also the people in the United States, the people across Europe. They know they can work with in the future, and not to ruin something or take it too far where they burn their bridges. Let the government in the West burn their bridges, isolate themselves. Hopefully someone new will come along and build a new bridge, and we could just everyone just move on forward together.
I would really wish for that to happen, but I just don't see it happening anytime soon.
No.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes,
it's been an
thank
absolute
you so much.
pleasure.
And a pleasure to meet you in person. And I'm a fan of your channel as well, so it's quite nice to meet you in person.
I'm sure a lot of you know Brian, but go check his channel. His coverage on Ukraine is absolutely fantastic. And But anyway, as always, for now, take care.
Bye.